Hi, and welcome to another scientific session with Tope. In the last episode, we took a granular look at pathogens. We had a look at bacteria, viruses, and parasites. We had a little bit of fun, touching on some fun facts about these pathogens, and then we also looked at how they are typically managed. Most of all, we looked at the mechanisms of action by which these pathogens try to evade our immune systems and cause diseases by invading our bodies. We essentially got to understand that we are in this perpetual, almost Tom and Jerry like battle with pathogens, where we're essentially always on the run and trying to evade these pathogens that are always trying to bypass our immune systems and invade our bodies to cause us diseases or illnesses. Well, did you know that there are a few factors that are essentially within your control that could be compromising your immune system and leaving you more vulnerable to these pathogens? In today's video, I'll take you through two of these factors, and for those who are a little bit more curious about physiology, I'll take you through one factor that is also self-induced but does not necessarily fall within your control, but could have very severe effects on your health and your immune system. Have you ever noticed that when you're working on something huge, maybe it's a big project that you have to deliver, a crunch time with really busy and tight deadlines at work, exam that's coming up really soon, a certification, maybe pressures relating to family responsibilities, kids, etc., that when it essentially becomes the really crunch time, the period where you almost really need to deliver, the time when you really don't need this to happen the most, you end up falling sick? Well, the reason for this may as well be stress. Stress is essentially defined as a heightened state of worry, a heightened state of mental alertness, anxiousness, and anxiety as a result of a perceived threat or a perceived trigger. Stress is a natural adaptation. It controls our flight or fight response. Now, these responses help us respond to a threat. We respond either by approaching and taking the threat head on, or by retreating from the threat if we feel or perceive that the threat is too dangerous. There's also other ways that people react to threats, due to shock, etc., that don't necessarily fall within the typical confines of a fight or flight response, but those we can touch on another day. But essentially, stress helps us modulate our flight or fight response, and what this does is it helps to protect us or prepare us to deal with the perceived threat. Stress does this by releasing a steroidal hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is a really powerful hormone and triggers the release of another hormone that you've probably heard about called adrenaline. Adrenaline does some really amazing things. It really turns human beings into almost superhumans. It essentially pulls all the energy and resources that you use for other day-to-day processes and redirects them towards action, fight, or flight. It does this by increasing your blood pressure, increasing your heart rate, constricting your blood vessels, and sending blood and resources towards the organs that need it the most for you to either take action in terms of confronting a threat or running away from the threat. It improves your breathing. It increases your ability to see by dilating your pupils to ensure that you're taking in as much light as possible. It ensures that your muscles have the exact amount of blood required to act, and it also reduces your perception of pain. That way, even if there's some sort of injury, you're still able to react in that period. And that's the reason why when people are frightened into something, they typically are able to act a lot more efficiently or effectively. It's also the reason why if you had a test tomorrow or some sort of deadline, you'd notice that the night before or the day before, just heading into the deadline, it almost seems like you're working at your absolute best. Some people survive off this actually, but it's because in that period your body is preparing or it's geared into action and it's essentially working in a really highly active state. Your brain is also a lot more active. So overall, stress is a good adaptation. Stress only becomes a problem when it's chronic. And so when you have a continuous perception of this threat. And because of this, your stress levels stay consistently heightened, leading to higher levels of cortisol on a chronic basis. Now, this becomes damaging because, as I mentioned earlier, you are essentially pulling on all the resources that you would use for your day-to-day activities, your digestion, your rest, your recovery, your regeneration of blood cells, your immune cells, etc. You're depleting all of these resources in action and not giving yourself the opportunity to recover them. It leads to higher systemic inflammation. This suppresses the immune system. It reduces your ability to recover, to heal. And what this does is it ends up leaving you vulnerable to diseases. Now, this is the reason why it's very important to know how to manage stress and to actively manage stress. You can do this by exercising regularly. Also, activities such as meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, and just learning to turn things off. A lot of the times we're worried about what has happened yesterday, what we're doing today, what's going to happen in the future, and essentially we just don't turn it off. But it's always good to keep in mind that all of these things that you're super worried about, either in the future, from the past, or today, whenever, you wouldn't be able to get to doing if you are not in good health. So turn it off and allow your body rest, recover, and keep your immune system in optimal condition. Now, the second factor that's essentially within your control is one that needs no introduction. You do this pretty much every day if you have the privilege to. And it's sleep. Sleep is a period of rest and recovery. It's a period where the body gets to rejuvenate itself. But beyond that, sleep also controls our circadian rhythm, which is essentially our body clock. Our body clock is controlled by the amount of light that we're able to perceive. It's also a natural adaptation. And so it's able to detect the amount of blue light or the amount of sunlight that we can perceive during the day. This happens by virtue of structures within our eyes called photoreceptors. They're able to detect when there's a lot of sunlight and essentially tell the body that, you know what, it's daytime, it's time to be active, it's time to get things done. And as the sun starts to set and the light starts to dim, they essentially realize, I'm not picking as much light. It's time to release a hormone known as melatonin, which tells the body it's time to rest and recover. During rest and recovery, your body is able to replenish itself. You replenish your blood cells. You replenish your immune cells. And you allow your brain to rest as well. And so what this does is it keeps you in a healthy state, keeps your immune system in an optimal condition to protect you. The issue comes in when you have bad sleeping patterns or bad sleeping habits. So you're not getting enough sleep at night. You're not getting your 7 to 8 hours of sleep. You're getting bad quality sleep. Or you have really bad sleeping habits, irregular sleep. You're spending a lot of time just before you sleep on your phone, getting all that blue light in and essentially telling your photoreceptors that I'm actually not really supposed to go to rest. What ends up happening is you have bad quality sleep, which leads to you not being able to recover optimally. And what this does is it keeps you tired during the day because your body clock has essentially been dysregulated, and this leads to a lot more deleterious effects. It increases your cortisol levels, circling all the way back to stress. It increases systemic inflammation. It suppresses your immune system because essentially your blood cells and your immune cells are unable to get replenished. And what all of this just does is it puts you in a much more vulnerable state for diseases. So it's important to try and get good quality regular sleep and have some good sleeping habits. Learn to wind down, shut off as much blue light as you can before you go to bed, and try to go to bed at a regular time, getting your 7 to 8 hours of sleep daily. Now, those are two factors that are within your control. You can essentially start modifying from tomorrow. But there's one factor I mentioned I was going to talk about. And this factor is for those who are a little bit more interested in general physiology. This factor is one that's not necessarily within your control, but it's also kind of self-induced. And it's a condition known as an autoimmune disease. Autoimmune diseases happen when the immune system mistakenly recognizes our own organs as bad and starts to attack them. And these organs don't really need to have anything wrong with them. Sometimes they're absolutely healthy organs, or most times they're absolutely healthy organs, and the immune system just attacks them. If you remember in a few episodes prior, I talked about antibodies and antigens. I'll try and link that up just in a box and also in the description. But essentially, we mentioned that antibodies recognize antigens, and when our immune systems are able to recognize bad antigens, the immune system attacks them. But now you have the immune system recognizing our own antigens within our own important organs and still going ahead and attacking these organs. It can be so devastating, causing really bad chronic diseases for those who suffer from it. Causes for autoimmune diseases can be hereditary. They can be caused by hormonal changes, but they can also be caused by environmental factors such as infection and exposure to certain toxins. As I mentioned earlier, they're chronic and very difficult to manage. You can't just throw in an antibiotic like as though you were dealing with a bacterium, because it's the immune system, it's part of you that's essentially attacking your own organ. So it's usually managed by managing the symptoms, trying to reduce as much pain as possible, and sometimes in really serious cases, managed by modulating or suppressing the immune system. As you can imagine, if you are suppressing the immune system, you're also leaving yourself vulnerable to opportunistic pathogens. Examples of autoimmune diseases that I can really just pull from the mind now are arthritis. This is where the immune system attacks your joints. Alopecia, where the immune system attacks the hair cells and essentially leads to loss of hair. Multiple sclerosis, an absolutely debilitating condition where the immune system attacks the nervous system. And so that is what the concept of an autoimmune disease is. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but if you have, maybe this is giving you a little bit more insight into it. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope you've understood a little bit more about these factors that you could control to ensure that your immune system is working optimally and protecting you from diseases. And if you've enjoyed the video, if you've enjoyed the bits of knowledge that I've shared today, please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments and let me know. Any bits that you'd like me to touch on in a future video, please let me know as well. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next episode.